This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q1043.
Justin Hawkins is here from The Darkness. The debut album, Permission to Land, came out 20 years ago. Wow. Sold millions of albums, won the band Brit Awards now 20 years later. The 20th anniversary of that amazing album now coming out in a special 20th anniversary edition called Permission to Land Again, featuring the full original album as well as B-sides, unreleased demos, live recordings of the band back in the day at Nebworth, Wembley Arena, and more. The band's also on tour in America as we speak. Get all the info on the band right now. TheDarknessLive.com or TheDarknessLive.com.
I quite like Live. I always saw it as live, but
yeah,
now that you said Live.
The Darkness Live. And
reminds me of that movie They Live.
Oh, right.
With,
okay.
Randy, what's his name? Roddy, the wrestler.
Oh, Roddy Piper?
Roddy, yeah, him.
He wore the kilt, I believe, didn't he?
I don't know anything about wrestling.
I don't either.
All I know is some of them made the transition into Hollywood megastars, and he was one of them.
Yeah, well, The Rock, look at that.
Yeah, was he a wrestler as well?
He was a wrestler originally.
What about Dave Bautista? Is he a wrestler?
Oh, okay, so Maritza knows, yeah.
Hulk Hogan?
Hulk Hogan, yeah. Huge.
I mean, although he
reality show.
He tends to play himself, that's the thing.
Right.
He's been typecast.
You have released 6 other excellent albums.
Why are we talking about wrestling?
Since the debut. But, I listened to this whole album, Justin, last night, and I hadn't listened to it in a long time.
For the first time?
No, I hadn't listened to it in a long time, but I've got to say, every single song right from the beginning is like a face-melting, fire-breathing, mosh pit-creating concert opener. This album, I think it's one of the best debut rock albums ever.
Okay, then give me 2 other examples of debut rock albums that you think would be contenders in that.
Well, I don't know if they're debuts, though. I mean, the thing that initially came to mind would be, Back in Black, AC/DC, but that's not
a debut.
That's not a debut.
That's like their 6th album.
I'm thinking of like
Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
That is, in my opinion, that is the greatest.
Yeah. I'm putting you right up there, though.
Wow.
I'm serious, man. Come on. I love The Darkness.
Okay.
Now, when you made this debut album, were those songs, it's 11 songs, I believe.
No, 10.
Is it 10?
Yeah.
Did you have them all set to go and you just went into the studio and hit record?
Not quite. No. You probably know this about me. I used to do jingles. I used to make, jingles for various different, and it was always the same thing. It would always be like, okay, we want to have this T-Rex song, but we can't afford it. Can you do something that sounds like it and don't get sued?
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's kind of like one of the ways that I learned how to produce music, really, is because I was sort of copying those tracks and working out, thematically, aesthetically, sonically and compositionally how these things are made,
right? And
then take it apart and put it back together in a way that doesn't get us sued, and I did that for quite a few years.
Okay.
And one of the things that we did were I did some IKEA adverts, and the money from that was pretty good, so I used it to buy myself and my brother Les Pauls, and the rest of the money went on making the first album.
Yeah. So
that was actually one of the cheapest albums made that year that was big. Another good example of it would be which one? What was the White Stripes record that had Seven Nation Army on it? Was that Elephant or something like that?
Might be, yeah.
Well, that record was another one that was similarly priced. It's about 20 grand. To make that record.
Not as cheap as Boston's debut album, though.
How much did Boston's?
He made it in his basement, and they got a record deal with
He's
Columbia.
lucky to have a basement. We all lived in bedsits.
Right, yeah, okay. He basically just made the record on his own, played everything, and took it to the label, and they're like, well, we need to do this. And he's like, no, just press it. And that's what they did, and the rest is history.
Well, it's a bit like what happened with us, because I think we recorded, so we took a little room at the end of 2K Studios, which is quite a well-known studio complex in Scrubs Lane in London, and they had a little end room that we put a mezzanine in, and that was where we did all our overdubs and stuff.
Okay.
And then when there was downtime, we'd go and sneak into the big room and record drums. But then the rest of the stuff, we'd do it in our little end room. We couldn't afford to keep that for too long. So we only did, over the course of the months that we were there, we did I Believe in a Thing Called Love, Love Is Only a Feeling, and a version of Love on the Rocks with no ice.
Yeah.
Which, that was the first EP that we did. And then after that, the rest of it was recorded in about 2 weeks in a place called The Chapel, which
Pretty
is in
quick.
Lincoln's. Yeah, it was quick.
Yeah.
But we rehearsed for it properly for about 6 weeks.
Okay. And you're out on tour now. Are you doing like track 1 all the way through to track 10 in the shows? Or?
We did, yeah. Well, we tried to do that. The first show we did was in San Francisco at the Masonic.
Okay.
And we did that. But what we did was, so like when we get to a song that was a single, for example, Get Your Hands Off My Woman, we would then play the associated B-sides for that single before we moved on to the next one.
Oh, okay.
And it was too many songs in the set. It wasn't very well streamlined. And I think one of the things that we'd forgotten about was when we signed our big, worldwide record contract, that was a bit further down the line in the campaign. So those songs never came out in America. So we were playing these obscure B-sides, and most of the room hadn't heard them, and they weren't really landing in the way that we liked them.
But these are on the compilation. These are on the box set.
Yeah, that's right. They'll be in there.
Yeah.
But I think originally they hadn't come out, so that first show was a bit tough, and we've managed to streamline it. We've kept some of the really interesting B-sides. And when I say interesting, I think I'm talking about a B-side that you make because you know it's going to be a B-side.
Oh, okay.
So you're not
right.
trying to make it a single.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be on the record. You're not trying to, make a sing-along chorus necessarily.
Right, yeah.
Do interesting stuff, dramatic monologues and weird solos and things. So there's a couple of songs like that in the set, which I'm really happy about.
You're on tour in the States now, over to Europe until the end of the year, and then down under in New Zealand.
Yeah. And Japan as well.
And Japan. I have to ask you about the podcast, Justin Rides Again, because I'm a huge fan. I think it's been successful for you, right? I mean, lots of people are subscribing. I just watched the Miles Kennedy interview.
Oh, he was great.
Is he the great? First of all, way to go, Miles, on the perfect Zoom setup.
Oh, my
great
God.
Audio, great lighting.
You know what happened? Like he and I have been on tour together. We talked about that in the episode, but so we've got a lot of mutual friends and stuff, and so one of my friends said, "Oh, Miles would be up for being on the thing." And then when I spoke to Miles, he was like, he was talking about doing some sort of podcast thing himself. So he'd set up, got himself a fancy camera, some lights and stuff, and he looked really pro.
It looked like cable news or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And the guy's a good-looking fella as well. So I think it was just like that was probably the most, in terms of production value, the best looking episode.
Right. Same with me when, we did a lot of Zooms during the pandemic. But that's sort of when this started. By the way, the podcast or the YouTube channel is Justin Hawkins Rides Again, with a fantastic theme song. How long did it take you to create that opening theme song? Or it just like...
Well, it developed. The first time I did it, I was literally sitting next to a piano, and my producer was filming me, and I just put my hands on it and just played the first thing that occurred to me. Then but that was an ascending Justin Hawkins Rides Again, and then but now I've gone like it's
descending.
Yeah, descending intervals of 3 semitones each time, so it's like a half diminished chord at the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting in theoretic music. In terms of music theory, it's interesting, but it was part of like a wider composition that I didn't feel like I'd ever get around to finishing, so I just nicked a bit of it and made that.
And that started during the pandemic when you were just sort of not doing much, I guess, or...
Yeah, well, the time before last when we were in Australia, it was the beginning of the pandemic, really, and we saw, like, the last 2 shows we were going to do were supposed to be in New Zealand, but they shut the borders. Oh. And then I was in Sydney and I saw Donald Trump declaring a state of emergency on the news, and I was like, guys, this thing's actually a lot more serious than we think it is. It hadn't really affected what we were doing. We noticed that there was sort of trepidation and like less people, like we'd sold out some venues and had to add shows to that Australian tour, but people weren't really showing up, like they were half full. And it was kind of like, okay, well, we should go home. So we went home and then just watched everything in our diary, and we had an exciting year planned just disappear.
Oh boy,
it was quite sad.
Easter is cancelled, right?
Easter was cancelled, and that's actually the weird thing was we made a record called Easter is Cancelled in 2019. 2020, that was one of the headlines we saw in an English tabloid. Easter is cancelled.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Are you doing the YouTube channel while you're on tour? Are you still able to do that, or is it's kind of hard to maybe do that? Or
I have done that before. But I think it's a bit of an arse-ache trying to bring around lights and trying to make it look nice. So I pre-recorded a lot of reactionary episodes, and pre-recorded some longer form podcasty bits, and I'll have to just work harder when I get home.
Yeah.
It's nice to not carry all that stuff around.
Right, yeah. The Taylor Hawkins tribute, I mean, you were fantastic at that. Tell me about that really quick and that whole experience. I think at one point you almost didn't want to do the Van Halen songs or something, or there was one thing you wanted to do, another lead singer of another band, you wanted him to do something maybe.
Oh, right. Yeah, well... Okay, well, Taylor Hawkins was a dear friend of the band. He was actually our drummer's godfather. It hit us pretty hard.
How did that happen?
We were on tour in I think we were in Edmonton on the night when we found out that he'd passed away, and it was devastating. So when the tribute show thing came around, it was like, okay, well, whatever you need me to do, I'll do anything.
I'm there, yeah.
And so Dave called me. And the list of things that he wanted me to do was like, he wanted me to do Queen, Van Halen, Coattail Riders, which extended into Level 42 and other stuff like that. So over the course of the 2 shows, I was on it a lot. Probably because of my surname, I would imagine. But I think there was one run through we did, and I think Dave Grohl said to Rufus, okay, well that's it then. Anything that where we don't know who's going to sing it or play it, we'll just get Justin to do it.
Well, yeah,
so I was on everything basically.
Wow.
Yeah, but the experience of it wasn't just about like the Wembley show, because we were all camped up in a really nice hotel, took over the whole hotel, and every artist that was on that tribute show ate together,
right,
stayed together. And it was a real
rehearsed. It
was family,
yeah.
and it was kind of not just the rehearsals, like the downtime and everything. We did everything together, and it was a bonding and healing experience for everybody concerned. It was just one of the most moving times of my life, because it was kind of like, just like you're in something and you know how important it is and how special the person that you're doing the tribute to. It's got to be right, and. I think it was cathartic for everybody that was involved in it, and not one performer of the Wembley one put a foot wrong. Like, it was just like, I thought it was an amazing day.
Well, from my perspective, just watching it just seemed really well put together and orchestrated and produced, and it sounded fantastic.
The Van Halen stuff was the funniest one, though, because Wolfgang didn't come in till the day before, so we went to the jam room, which was actually at Wembley, and that was the first time we ran it the day before.
Wow.
So and I think, like, I was thinking that somebody like Michael Starr from Steel Panther would be the ideal thing.
Yeah, that's
but I don't know whether there was like any sort of connection between, because I don't really sound like David Lee Roth, and I would never presume to try and pretend to be David Lee Roth. But they were quite happy with me doing my version of it.
Yeah.
So it was. As soon as we fired it up, it was like we just did one run through, and then the next day we played it to 90,000 people.
I mean, just that had to be so much fun. Gosh.
I mean, Wolfgang's he's a sweetheart, for someone that talented with that prestige, and that kind of, I never understand the abuse he gets from Van Halen fans.
Hey,
have you seen that? I mean, it's just
on Twitter. He engages, and I asked him. I interviewed him a couple of times. I go, "Why do you do that?" He goes, "It's fun." And I'm like, "Okay,
But I mean, the stuff that they're saying to him is crazy. I mean, he deserves better. He's a talented person in his own right.
He plays
can do
every
that
instrument. I mean, he's a musical genius.
Yeah, there aren't many people like him in the rock sphere. There's people like him in the jazz sphere, but he's a pretty much a one-off in the rock. And I love him, and I just think he's a lovely bloke. But yeah, but I think he was a bit, I mean, everybody was a bit nervous. So this is going to get me cancelled, but I gave him a big hug, and just as we were going to go on, I said to him, "Okay, Wolfgang, let's go." And then, which I meant
Well, you meant in the most sincere, lovable,
I just wanted him to feel fired up, and I wanted to make him laugh as well, So, and that was a thing. Like Wolfgang and I will be friends for the rest of our lives now.
Yes,
that's just a thing that
you just got married over the weekend, right?
Right. So we bonded, and it's beautiful.
Fantastic. Justin Hawkins is with us. We're talking about lots of things, including the Darkness debut album, Permission to Land. Again, the 20th anniversary reissue and box set of that. The band is on tour now. You can get all the info right now at thedarknesslive.com, or you might prefer thedarknesslive.com. Either one works. Last question for you.
I think live would be more surprising.
I play this song every year around the holidays, Christmas time, Don't Let the Bells End. And I think, and I say it on the air whenever I play it, I say this is the greatest Christmas song ever written. And by the way, the video is amazing as well. Can you, I know it was that was 20 years ago too, I guess.
Yeah, it was the same year as the album, yeah.
But talk about that song, because I'm going to use that part of this interview when I play it again this year.
All right. Okay, so 2003, we had just had a brilliant year, and I had a great relationship with Atlantic Records, and they were at one point during the summer. They said, "Okay, guys, it's all going really well. What do you want to do next?" And then I think we just racked our brains to try and imagine what the worst and stupidest thing to do would be, and so obviously, doing Christmas songs is a desperately unfashionable thing for a band to try and do, and could potentially derail any sort of momentum we'd gathered over the course of the year, and it was the obvious choice for us, really. And they were all for it. So they gave us a list of producers, engineers, and studios, who were available and up for doing it. And there were some big names on there. We chose Bob Ezrin.
Oh man.
We chose Chenzo Townsend. As for the engineer, and we chose Abbey Road for the studio.
Oh.
And
go for it.
Yeah,
just
so
go
for
for
if you're going to do a Christmas song and you're going to be wrangling kids kids to do singing, you need somebody like Bob Ezrin, who's made Schools Out,
right?
Another Brick in the Wall,
right?
Somebody who understands
smaller artists, yeah.
But a guy that knows how to make a children's choir sound, like it should on a rock record,
Yeah.
And he was amazing. And Bob Ezrin in Abbey Road, one of the greatest experiences of our existence, really. It was so much fun. And obviously managed to get a really puerile, juvenile play on words into the chorus.
Right.
Which is nice.
And it rocks.
That's
big time.
Bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, bottom line, it rocks.
It must rock.
Any new music in the works?
Actually, the good thing about doing this 20th anniversary stuff is that it's given us a year to not feel pressured to create stuff. So the stuff we're creating is, I don't know, it's freer. We're going to give ourselves the whole of next year to make a new album. We've written half of it, and we're already super excited because it's a bit outside of what people would expect from a Darkness album, and it's just, I can't wait for it to come out because I think it's going to be our best one.
Us too. Justin, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q104.3.